The air pulsed with heat, thick and oppressive as if the land itself refused to breathe. Dust rose in clouds with each footstep, clinging to skin and lashes, settling into the folds of skirts and the seams of boots. The scent of sun-baked leather, horse sweat, and old blood hung heavy over the auction yard. Flies moved lazily between the shoulders of men lined up like cattle, their faces shaded under wide-brimmed hats, eyes sharp, waiting for spectacle. Above them, the sky loomed a pale, merciless blue, stretched taut and without relief. She stood at the edge of the platform, bound at the wrists with coarse rope, her back slick with sweat and streaked with dried blood. The whip had bitten just minutes ago. The crowd had gone quiet afterward, not from shame but boredom. They had expected more noise. She hadn't given it. Emmy's chin was lifted, stubborn in its defiance, though her legs trembled faintly, dust caked on her bare feet. Her dress, if it could be called that, hung in tatters, the once white linen browned by travel, filth, and the callousness of those who brought her here. They didn't know where she came from. She didn't tell them. The traders who captured her claimed she was part of a wagon raid gone wrong, said she was found hiding under the broken axles. Wild they called her. Barely spoke, too pretty to waste. She didn't argue. She didn't speak at all. That was their greatest frustration, how she wouldn't offer a single word they could twist into obedience. She stared straight ahead when they stripped her name from her mouth. She flinched only once, not from pain but when someone behind her laughed. It sounded like her uncle's laugh, and for a moment she thought she might fall. "She's quiet," one man said now, nudging the trader beside him. "Maybe she's dumb." The trader chuckled. "Or smart enough to know it ain't worth begging to." The auctioneer stepped forward, brushing dust from his vest, eyes flicking over the girl as if appraising a mule. He raised his hand to gather attention. "She's strong," he called. "Young. No signs of sickness. Bit of fire but not untrainable. Broke a broom handle over her back last week and she still cooks clean." Laughter rose like crows from the crowd. Emmy did not look down. "Let's start the bidding at 15, the auctioneer announced. 10, someone called from the back. 11, 13. A lull. No one wanted to go higher. Not when there were boys on offer who could dig wells and break horses. Not when a girl came with gossip and the risk of bite behind her eyes. The silence was stretching when someone in the front stepped forward. He wasn't part of the usual crowd. His hat was low, casting shadow over a sun-lined face. He looked like the desert itself had stood up and taken form, brown, dry, but unyielding. His clothes were plain, his boots worn but well kept. He said nothing for a long moment, just looked at her. Then he removed one leather glove slowly, fingers brown from sun and dirt, and reached into his coat pocket. "I'll trade," he said. His voice was low and deliberate. 2 head of cattle and 1 saddle mule. All sound. The auctioneer blinked. "No coin." "Trade's fair," the man replied. "Better stock than what $15 buys you in this heat." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man behind the auctioneer, perhaps the trader, stepped forward angrily. "She ain't livestock." "She's not for whipping either," the stranger replied, eyes fixed on the girl. That silenced them for a heartbeat. The auctioneer scratched his beard, half smiling, unsure whether to laugh or not. "You want her for cooking? Company?" "I want her off that stage." Emmy's breath hitched. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. There was no softness. No flirtation. No ownership. Just the kind of quiet certainty that settled heavy in the dust. The auctioneer spat into the dirt. Done. The ropes were cut. She nearly fell but caught herself, straightening too fast. Her knees screamed. She looked to the stranger. He did not move to catch her. "What's your name, girl?" the auctioneer asked. She didn't answer. The man looked at her then, eyes dark under the brim of his hat, and nodded once, not as a question but an invitation. "Miss," he said simply, then turned and walked toward the horses. She followed, slowly, her legs stiff, her shoulders curled inward. Every step away from the platform felt like stolen ground. The crowd parted, curious but disinterested now that the drama had dulled. A few boys whistled. One threw a stone that missed. She didn't turn her head. She only looked forward. The man had already saddled a horse and led another by the reins. The mule was tethered behind, quiet and steady. He mounted, then extended a hand. She hesitated. "Don't worry," he said, his tone dry. "I'm not lifting you." So she climbed. It took effort. Her arms were weak, her legs sorer than she thought, but she got up behind him, holding the saddle horn instead of him. He didn't look back, didn't ask questions. He clicked his tongue and they began moving out of the yard. They rode in silence for miles. Dust trailed behind them like smoke, the sun heavy on their backs. Emmy watched the land pass, the brittle brush, the long shadows of buzzards circling above. Her fingers ached from gripping the saddle, but she refused to hold on to him. Eventually they stopped under a half-dead tree by a creek. He dismounted, offering her the canteen. She took it wordlessly, drank slow, the water tasting like metal and mercy. He handed her a small cloth bundle. Inside was cornbread and dried meat. She ate mechanically, chewing until her jaw ached. "I've got a place north," he said. "Not much but quiet. You'll be safe." Still she said nothing. "You don't have to talk." Her hands froze over the cloth. Her eyes flicked to his. There was no challenge there, no command, only space. That, more than anything, made her chest ache. "I don't expect nothin' from you," he added after a moment. "You sleep, you eat, you mend what needs mendin'. That's enough." She studied him as he poured water over his hands. There was something deliberate in his movements, not slow, not rushed, just exact. She wondered what it felt like to move through the world without flinching, to trust the sound of your own steps. As the sun dropped lower, he built a small fire. They sat on opposite sides. She wrapped the blanket he gave her around her shoulders, the fabric coarse but clean. She listened to the crackle of wood, to the calls of coyotes in the distance. Her eyes grew heavy. Before sleep claimed her, she whispered one word. "Emmy." He didn't look up from the fire, but his voice reached her like the low hum of thunder. "Cole." She slept then, not deeply but without fear. Her dreams were strange, flickers of long grass and a swing on a cottonwood tree. She awoke once in the night and found him still awake, stoking the fire, keeping watch. Not for danger. For her. The next morning they rode again. When they crested a hill, his ranch came into view. Low wood fences, a barn patched with rusted tin, a small house with peeling paint. She blinked at it, expecting disappointment, but felt a flicker of something else. He helped her down this time, careful not to touch her. She stumbled once and he caught her elbow, briefly, gently, then let go. He gestured toward the door. "Room's on the left. There's water inside. Rest if you need." She walked slowly across the porch, her hand trailing the worn rail. Inside the room was simple. Cot, basin, a window that looked east. A red kerchief hung from the peg on the wall, the only splash of color. She touched it absently, then sat on the edge of the bed. Through the window she could see him moving toward the barn, already busy. She watched until he disappeared behind the doors. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held shape. She laid back on the bed, the straw mattress rough but real beneath her. Her fingers found the edge of the blanket and pulled it over her shoulder. For the first time in weeks, she closed her eyes and didn't brace for pain. It would be a long road to peace, she knew that. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she trusted the way he looked at her. Not like property. Not like prey. Like a person learning how to let another be. Outside, the wind moved through the fence posts like a whisper. It didn't carry screams or laughter. Just the steady hush of open land, wide and waiting. The wind spoke softly over the prairie grass, curling against the wooden slats of the porch where Emmy sat with her knees pulled close, chin resting atop them. The chipped enamel mug in her hands had long gone cold, but she held it anyway as if its weight tethered her to the moment. Behind her, the low creak of the rocking chair gave the rhythm of an old lullaby, though no one rocked it. Cole was down by the fence line, repairing the gate with the same slow precision he seemed to give everything. He hadn't spoken much since they arrived 2 weeks ago, and she hadn't expected him to. His silence wasn't like others. It didn't crowd her. It left room. Inside the house, the walls had begun to lose their echo. At first, every sound Emmy made had felt too loud, the clatter of a plate, the creak of floorboards beneath her feet. She'd moved like a ghost, afraid of notice, always expecting a reprimand. But Cole never raised his voice. Never hovered. He ate what she cooked without comment and took his coffee the same way each morning. Black, with a small nod of thanks that felt more sincere than whole sentences. She had learned the ranch by walking it. Each morning, before the sun lifted fully from the horizon, she rose and traced the boundary, past the stable, down to the water trough, up the rise to the stone fence. Her boots, borrowed and too big, scuffed the dry earth, but she liked the feeling of walking a known path. It gave shape to the hours. The landscape, though harsh, held its own kind of order. The wind always came from the west, and the crows always gathered on the east side of the barn roof before dusk. She began mending things without being asked, splitting logs for the stove, scrubbing the window glass clean of grime, patching a hole in the stable roof with a scrap of oilcloth. Cole never commented on these things, but one morning she found a pair of work gloves on the porch bench, small enough to fit her hands. No note. Just there. Once, as she poured water into the trough, a mare approached and nudged her shoulder. She paused, unsure. The horse was young, sleek with a pale coat like cloudlight. Its breath steamed against her arm. She reached up, let her fingers rest on its nose. It didn't pull away. Cole watched from a distance, then turned and went back to hauling hay. They settled into a rhythm built more from space than exchange. When they did speak, it was practical. Weather, fencing, meals. Emmy found she preferred it that way. Words could trap. They could promise things she didn't trust herself to want. But silence, she was learning, could also be kind. The town lay 3 miles east, a crooked collection of weather-beaten buildings and eyes that remembered too much. Emmy went with Cole once a week for supplies. He kept his hand on the small of her back, not possessive but present, and never left her side even when the shopkeepers watched her like she might slip silver into her apron. One afternoon, as they passed the saloon, 2 women on the porch narrowed their eyes. "That her?" one murmured, not quietly enough. "Yup. Auction girl." Heard she bit a man's hand off. Emmy kept walking, but the heat in her neck rose like fever. Cole didn't react, didn't look back. Later, when she reached for the sack of flour he carried, he handed it over without a word. The weight of it steadied her. Gossip thickened like smoke over the following weeks. Someone said she had a knife hidden in her boot. Someone else said she never slept, just paced the house like a spirit. They asked why Cole hadn't sent her off or taken her to wife, and when he didn't answer, they invented stories to fill the gap. She heard the whispers each time she rode into town, and though no one said them to her face, she felt them crawl along her skin like ants. At night, she stood by the window watching shadows flicker in lamplight. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give them that. Cole noticed, though he didn't speak of it. One evening he handed her a book, worn and faded, its pages full of hand-copied poems. She opened it slowly, tracing a line written in spidery script. "And still I rise." She didn't say thank you. But she kept it beside her bed. Their connection grew not in bursts but in the way seasons change, subtle, patient, inevitable. Cole began leaving small things behind. A slice of apple pie wrapped in cloth left on the stoop, a folded shirt draped over the fence post mended clean. Emmy responded in kind. A polished horseshoe hung above the barn door. A shirt she patched with red thread. They didn't touch. Not really. Once, her fingers grazed his when they reached for the same hammer. Another time, she brushed a burr from his coat sleeve. That was all. But each contact hummed with unspoken weight, as if the absence of touch made it louder. One evening, rain threatened. The clouds swelled low and violet, the smell of ozone sharp in the air. Emmy stood in the doorway, watching the line of darkness creep across the plains. Cole stepped beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Storm'll break tonight," he said. She nodded. "We'll need to check the southern fence." "I already did." They stood without speaking for a long while. Then she asked, "Why did you take me?" He didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, rustling the grass in long, whispering strokes. "Didn't sit right," he said finally. "What they were doing. You don't even know who I am." "Don't have to." That struck something deep inside her, sharp and raw. She turned back toward the room, heart beating against her ribs like a trapped bird. Later that night, thunder cracked across the sky. The roof trembled under the downpour. Emmy woke, tangled in sweat and memory, the smell of rain seeping through the window. She padded to the kitchen, found Cole sitting at the table, a lantern burning low. He looked up but didn't speak. "I used to like storms," she said quietly. "Before." He nodded, motioned to the chair across from him. She sat, wrapping her arms around herself. "Used to think if I kept still enough," she said, "nothing bad could find me." He didn't say it was foolish. He didn't offer comfort. He just let the silence stretch between them like a bridge. "You're not there anymore," he said finally. It wasn't reassurance. It was truth. She nodded, and for the first time in weeks, her eyes prickled with heat. She blinked hard, pressing the heel of her hand against her brow. The next day, she rose before dawn and walked the perimeter twice. The world felt different, cleaner, washed by rain. She picked wild sage and left it on the windowsill. When she returned to the porch, Cole was waiting with 2 mugs, one already steaming. He handed her the other, and they sat without speaking, watching the fog lift off the field. The peace of that morning settled over her like a second skin. She didn't trust it fully. Not yet. But she was beginning to believe that perhaps she could. By the end of the second month, The wounds on her back had closed. The skin still ached on cold mornings, but she no longer started at every noise. Her hair had grown enough to braid. She tied it with a strip of cloth torn from an old shirt. The town still talked. People always would. But she didn't flinch at their stares now. She walked beside Cole with her shoulders straight, her gaze ahead. He never shielded her. He never hid her. That mattered more than anything. One morning, a boy from the post office delivered a telegram to the ranch. He barely looked at her, too nervous to meet her eyes. Cole read the note, then burned it in the stove. When she asked who it was from, he shook his head. "Trouble," he said simply. "Old kind." Something in his tone made the hair on her arms rise. She didn't press him. But that night, she sharpened the kitchen knives and set one beneath her mattress. She was no longer afraid of shadows. But she had learned to recognize their shape. Outside, the wind shifted. Distant thunder rolled low across the plain. The quiet would not last. The firelight danced along the barn's eaves, flickering gold into the night, its glow too bright, too fast, unnatural. Emmy stood barefoot in the mud, the hem of her dress soaked, her breath rising in small clouds despite the heat pulsing from the flames. Sparks flared upward into the dark, carried on wind like silent alarm bells. Somewhere behind her, Cole's boots moved across the packed earth, deliberate and quick. The stallion inside screamed once before Cole threw open the stable doors and vanished into the smoke. The fire had started just past sundown, when the last of the sky's color drained and silence had settled like dew. Emmy had been on the back porch, shelling peas, the rhythm soothing in a way only repetition could be. She smelled the smoke before she saw the glow, sharp and acrid, not like a hearth fire but wild, careless. It curled under the eaves, slipped down her throat like a threat. Then the light flared over the hill. Cole had burst from the barn, shirt half-buttoned, rifle in hand. He met her at the steps without speaking, the question already answered in the curve of her eyes. Someone had done this. Someone had come. She didn't ask who. She knew. When Cole had received that telegram a week ago, she hadn't pressed. But something in the lines of his shoulders had changed afterward, tightened like reins. He'd worked later into the night, kept his rifle closer, walked the perimeter twice each evening. He'd grown quieter, but not in the way that comforted. His silence had become loaded, waiting. Now the fire cracked louder, throwing embers into the dry grass. Emmy turned and saw them. 3 men on horseback, shapes against the blaze, too far to make out clearly, but familiar in posture and intent. The middle one dismounted and walked slowly forward, the others hanging back like teeth behind a tongue. His hat was tipped low. She recognized the coat first, patched on the right shoulder, stained with boot oil. It was Garrett, one of the traders from the auction yard. His smile carried easily through the smoke. "Evenin', sweetheart," he called, voice rough with liquor and smoke. "Heard you found yourself a little kingdom. Thought we'd come see how the queen lives." Her throat tightened. She stepped forward, placing herself between the porch and the fire. She could hear the horses breathing, their hooves shifting nervously in the dry grass. Cole emerged from the barn behind her, a hand on her back for just a second, steadying, not guiding, then stepped past her with the rifle at his side. "You're trespassing," he said, voice low. Garrett shrugged. "Didn't think we needed an invitation. Thought we might just reclaim what was ours." "She was never yours. She was property." "No," Emmy said, voice breaking through. "I wasn't." The silence that followed was heavy, not with surprise but expectation. She had never spoken to them before. Not like this. Garrett looked at her like she was a dog that had learned to growl, amused, curious, and vaguely annoyed. "You got real fine manners now," he said. "He teach you that?" "No," she said. "Survival did." Garrett stepped closer, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. The fire threw his shadow long across the yard. Behind him, one of the horses stamped nervously. "Look," he said, voice shifting. "We don't want trouble. We just want the girl. Ain't no need for blood." Emmy could feel Cole's tension beside her, the way his fingers flexed against the rifle. But he didn't raise it. "I'm not going," she said. Garrett smirked. "You think he's gonna fight for you? What are you to him, anyway? A debt he's too proud to leave unpaid." Cole didn't speak. He didn't have to. Emmy stepped forward instead. "I am not a debt," she said louder this time. "I am not a ghost or a trade or a rumor. I'm not yours. I never was." She reached down and lifted the hem of her dress, revealing the knife she'd kept hidden in her boot. The same knife she'd sharpened nights ago. The blade gleamed in the firelight, small but certain. "Go home," she said. Garrett laughed, but it cracked slightly at the edges. You threatening me, little girl? No, she said. I'm telling you. I've lived through worse men than you. You don't scare me anymore. A moment passed. Then Garrett moved. Fast. Cole raised the rifle, but not fast enough. The other men shifted, drawing their guns, but before Garrett could clear his holster, Emmy was there. The knife met his forearm, slicing deep. He cursed and stumbled back, stunned not by pain, but by the fact that she'd done it at all. Cole's shot rang out a second later, splintering the air. The bullet hit the dirt by one of the horses, sending the animal rearing. The others scattered, hooves thundering into the night. Garrett fell back into the grass, clutching his arm, eyes wide. You won't get another warning, Cole said. Garrett looked between them, man and woman, firelit and still. Emmy's breath came fast, chest heaving, but her grip was steady. The knife didn't shake. He scrambled to his feet, backing away slowly, one hand pressing the blood into his coat. You think this is over? It is for you, Emmy said. He turned and fled, half running, half limping to his horse. The others were already gone. Within moments, the darkness swallowed them. The fire crackled beside them, still roaring, but the tension had broken. Emmy dropped to her knees in the mud, the knife slipping from her hand. Cole knelt beside her, touching her shoulder with care. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She simply breathed, each inhale an act of reclamation. He helped her stand, one arm around her back as they staggered toward the house. The barn would burn, it was too far gone now. But the house would hold. The land would heal. Inside, he brought water, wrapped a towel around her hands. She watched the flames through the window, the orange glow flickering against the glass. For the first time, she realized she wasn't afraid of fire anymore. You didn't have to do that, Cole said quietly. Yes, she said. I did. He looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them, something old and new at once. Not gratitude. Not pity. Recognition. She stood then, went to the shelf, and retrieved the book of poems he'd given her weeks before. She opened it to the back cover and tore out a blank page. Then she picked up a pencil and began to write. Her hand trembled at first, but the words came. Asterisk, my name is Emmeline Rose Harper. I was not saved. I chose. Asterisk. She handed it to him, folded and clean. He read it once and nodded. No words. Just understanding. Outside, the fire dimmed, reduced now to embers. A few stars broke through the clouded sky. Emmy walked to the porch again, breathing in the scent of smoke and sage. The air was warm. Her feet were bare. She didn't tremble. She could feel the scar on her back pulse slightly as she moved, but it didn't pain her. It was just part of her body now. Like her name. Like her voice. Cole joined her a minute later, standing a few feet away. She didn't need him closer. She knew he was there. What now? He asked. She looked toward the horizon where the fire no longer reached. Now, she said, I plant something. He didn't question it. He just nodded, and the silence that settled between them was no longer the absence of speech. It was a space big enough for two people to become who they were always meant to be. Emmy stepped off the porch and walked toward the fence line, toward the place where green things still lived. She would dig with her hands if she had to. Tomorrow she'd mend the soil and scatter seeds. Tonight she would rest. And in the morning something would grow.